Talking of slandering Ferrari, another thing that I quite often like to slander on this podcast are Pirelli tyres. And that is why our first item is Pirelli, because they are bringing some new tyres for Silverstone, apparently. It's going to be a new, tougher tyre construction from the British Grand Prix to help cope with a rapid escalation in car performance. Definitely didn't read that straight off the press release.
Thanks, Mario.
Yeah. The new specification contains materials that we've already developed for 2024, which will make the tyres more resistant without affecting any of the other technical parameters or their behavior on track. Right, listen, let me tell you now, that's bullshit for a start.
Yeah, if you could see my face, if you could see my face, you know the doubt meme? Press X for doubt.
Yeah, we're going to get into that in a minute, but more pressing, right?
Okay.
They said this move is not being made because of safety concerns, but more as a bid to guarantee no problems further down the line. The compounds of the new tyres will be identical to what is currently being used. But what they failed to mention is that the reason this is going through is because the FIA pushed it through for safety reasons, which they can do as part of technical regulations article 10.8.3. Definitely had to write that down.
Yep. You don't know that one.
I just thought that was hilarious. Like, this isn't for safety grounds, but we got the FIA to push it through on safety grounds. And so GG's for that one. And all the teams are going to get to test it in FP1 and FP2 at the Spanish Grand Prix. I think they're getting 2 sets of tyres to test out with.
Yeah. And they'll run them in pre-practice 1 and pre-practice 2. I mean, even my cat, hearing you say that, Barry's like, yo, dog, that's a load of shit. Right, Barry? Yeah, he's passed out now. He got bored of hearing the Pirelli slander. He's like, classic, boring, typical. So what that sounds like is they took at face value that they expected the teams to get slower as a result of the floor edge height changes. And they were like, it's going to lose half a second. But if you looked at the development rate of teams through the season, you're like, nah. And then you've had teams like Aston make astronomical jumps. Their high-speed cornering performance is probably on par with the Red Bull and Ferrari. They're a little bit slow in the straight line, but it's very likely what they're looking at is stress concentrations either somewhere in the belts or in the shoulder of the tire where it joins that. But the fact that, I mean, they could probably get quite close to not changing many of the other characteristics, but if you change construction, you will change the characteristics. The fact that they're not changing the compounds bodes well, but if you change the construction, you can still impact how the compounds heat up and everything else. So,
yeah, like you say, there's no way that you can reinforce the sidewalls or shoulders of these tires and have it not affect the dynamics of the tire in some way. So either way, they can say, oh, well, the compounds aren't changing. It's not going to make that much of a difference to the teams. Well, that's horseshit. And that's 2 former F1 engineers telling you that that's horseshit. It's going to change a lot of things. They're going to have to remake all their tire models, the teams, that is.
But to be fair, though, I will say if it's not a massive change, it could be tweaks. It could be anywhere between tweaks or a shuffle. And at the end of the day, fuck it. Send it, right? Like, it's one of those things. Like, you remember, like back in the day when they're like, right, there was the whole thing about front rear interconnected suspensions, or the Pro Pitch system, which basically linked the front and rear axles and heave. People were like, there were a lot of teams when they're lobbying, they're like, yeah, Mercedes front rear interconnected or frick is better than everybody else. If we get it banned, they'll go slower. It never happened. Everybody lost roughly the same amount of performance, and you couldn't tell that one team gained or lost out more. And if you change the entire tire specification because Ferrari kind of didn't put enough margin, their safety factor for in-season development, because when's the last time a Formula One car got faster over the course of a season?
Every fucking year?
Except for Mercedes last year.
I reckon the W13 got quicker as the year went on.
Well, they were kind of like 0.5% off the whole season, so
they did get closer. The maths. I'll take your word for it.
They did get closer to a couple events, and they had some really shit ones in there. But yeah, like a lot of teams found a fair chunk of performance, and to be like, they said they're going to change the floor, they will never figure out these aerodynamics. Ha ha ha! They did.
Done. Test day 1. Done. Thanks. Yeah, exactly. What else you got for us?
Yeah, exactly. Go on, Mario. But you know what? It's a sole tire supplier. If it prevents catastrophic failures,
fine.
Send it.
Yeah, whatever.
And if it shakes up the order, send it. I want it to happen. I want chaos.
I started this section with Pirelli slander, right? But hear me out. I'm actually going to back him up now.
All right, go on, big man.
It cannot be easy to fucking pander to FOM and their, oh, you have to make a tire, but it can only last this amount. It has to be like really, performance characteristics have to be through the roof. Oh, but it can only last a certain amount of laps. And like, as a tire manufacturer, you're like, okay, so I've got to make a really good tire, but it needs to purposely be shit after a certain amount of time, sort of thing. You know, it's just like, I don't envy them for the task they're having to do.
No. And you couldn't really do that with a tire war. Imagine you had a tire war, right? And they're like, right, everybody, we need to have, a 2-stop race because the hardest compound that you bring is too shit. And they're like, nah, mate, we're 1-stopping this shit. You guys on a 2-stop are going to get absolutely clapped.